welcome back to Route Recon. Today's a new day. As I mentioned in my previous video, I'm going to start putting together some Route Recons, create a new list on my channel that's related to routes that I'm taking. Pretty much they're going to be day trips. Yesterday, I took a hellacious long trail with my president and co-founder of Diving Devil Dogs, which I'm also a vice president and co-founder. And that was a very long trail. It took us over 6 hours to do. It was the Senator Highway, and then we merged into the Wagner Road. Today we're going to the East Valley of Arizona, into the Globe area. And there's a couple of trails out there. I don't know exactly the name of it, but I'll go ahead and put it in this video so that you know what the name of the trails that we're going to hit. And today I've got with me Gary. He's the 82nd Airborne vet from Afghanistan that I had in my previous Overland video. He's here with a friend of his and his 2 kids. So it's going to be an interesting day today. This is a trail that I have yet to explore, so hence the reason why I've decided to do these Route Recons, so that I can recon these trails and maybe map out potential campsites and areas that would be good for others to go camping. And that's pretty much what these Route Recons are going to be. And it's also a way of allowing me to kind of purge from the week. You know, if I don't have anybody to go camping with, or if, you know, I'm having a bad day or rough time at school, it gives me that opportunity to pick a route, go out there, explore it. Maybe perhaps, you know, I'll find a diamond in the rough, you know, a good spot to go camping with your friends and stuff. So with that being said, once again, thank you for enjoying my videos. Hit that subscribe and like button. I'm Javi with Route Recon, and we're getting ready to go on a Route Recon. See you at the route. Well, there you have it. Another Route Recon. Now, let me be frank with you. This route was no joke. Throughout the whole entire route, were challenged with this wash. He got stuck multiple times. I had to use recovery gear to pull out, we call it the toaster, his Honda Element. And as we thought we saw the light of day, he rolled his vehicle. Thank the Lord that nothing happened to him and his family and his passengers. But it took us roughly 2 hours and determination. You know, we're both veterans, combat veterans, and he's Army, I'm Marines. You put us two together, you got sheer grit and determination for us to get out of this hairy situation, and we were able to. This rancher came by and helped us out a little bit, but there's not much he could really do for us, but we were able to get out of a pretty tight situation. All in all, if I had to grade this trail, I would have to grade it based on my vehicle, somewhere in the high 8s, 9s. This was a really challenging, put me through the ringer, but I learned a lot about my vehicle. I learned a lot about myself. The only issue, I had some minor bumper damage, and I had my winch that I was using for the most part to help him out. I guess when you think about it, it happens. I thought to myself, I hope my winch does not snap, and it sure did. But I got him upright, was able to use back up, and I pulled him out using brute force with my 5.7 liter Hemi Dodge Ram pickup truck. And now he's safely on his way going home. Safely on the way going home, trying to find a place to get some chow. And other than that, I hope you like this video. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. Still trying to reach that 100 subscribers. This is my new thing that I'm going to start doing in conjunction with my camping trips. This is going to be my Route Recon, and as I go on a little bit, hopefully I'll start giving the Leaders Recon rating of Route Recons. So that being said, I'm glad to be here. I'm glad my buddy is safe, Gary's safe, his kids are safe, his friend is safe. I'm so happy everything turned out for the best. Wish everybody a great day. I sure am having a great day. And with that being said, and catch you on the next time around. This is Javi with Leaders Recon. Leaders Recon out.